or exaggerated. You can talk about it with the sun, but you can't talk about that with the moon. The moon does not change.
Yes, you can. I think it's called a supermoon, and it happens quite often.
On a day-to-day basis. As the moon.
Well, the moon even changes size when you're moving around yourself. When you drive towards it or away from it, it will change in angular size.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and I can provide images of the sun shrinking in angular size as it goes beyond the horizon, not below it, beyond it, and disappears above the horizon.
With a solar filter?
I don't have one with a solar filter, but
exactly.
There is many observations of the sun and moon changing angular size and distance.
Not sufficient enough on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, from sunrise to noon to sunset, you have completely inadequate levels of size deviation. If you're talking about perspective, the sun should double in size as it goes over.
Not proving globe Earth, though.
It's
not a globe Earth
proof. You don't have to prove globe Earth. That's done.
Not debunking flat Earth at all, ladies and gentlemen. For you don't look at the sun to know what's going on under your feet, the ground. That would be tantamount to me wanting a shave, and I'm going to look at the woman across the road as a reflection to have a shave. I'm not going to look at the mirror, the one that I need to see my face. I'm going to look at your mirror across the road. How silly is that? Stupid.
So looking at the sky with the mysteries that could be in place from the flat Earth perspective is no way to prove the geometry of the ground. So if we can go back to empirical direct evidence, all we're left with is the self-evident fact that we live on a topographical stationary plane, and every single experiment or optical.
Where do you get those measurements from then?
Us. They've made no measurements. They get all the measurements from us.
You're both looking in the sky.
No, but if you take the sky away. Yeah, take the sky away, and let's talk about the geometry of the Earth. Let's talk about the motion of the Earth, which is where the actual claims of the globe is. We don't have any evidence for motion or curvature.
Yes, we do. We have focus pendulum. We also have ring laser gyroscopes which measure with 15 degrees per hour drift.
And both
Can you tell me why the magnetic field actually affects the ring laser gyroscopes?
It's not going to affect it exactly.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, but where do the measurements come from?
Wait, you said it doesn't affect it? The magnetic field doesn't affect the ring laser?
The magnetic field affects light in the interior of a ring laser gyroscope.
Okay, well, you can just read the paper for yourself and figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's also affected by the direction of travel as well. And this highlights issues we have with light, the lack of understanding we have with light, the two-way speed of light. And when you're traveling in a certain direction, the fringe shift is different. So when it comes to the gyro is not proving that there is rotation of the Earth. If there was rotation of the Earth, then there would be something called the Coriolis effect for things that are in motion in the atmosphere. And there is no flipping Coriolis. Stop saying. Give me an example of direct Coriolis.
Camera. Oh.
Good grief.
Give me an example of Coriolis in nature.
Let me get in here.
Give me an example of Coriolis in nature. You made a claim, back it up.
Wait, let's go back to the ring laser first. I just posted the paper about the magnetic fields and how they can affect it.
Yeah, let's finish the ring laser and then talk about the justification for calling that the rotation of the Earth. But go ahead, Tayler, because you clearly got something to say on that.
FE Corps was so confident in their position that they had someone in their team buy a ring laser gyroscope at not inconsiderable expense. That's how confident they were. And when they turned it on and set it on a table, it registered a 15 degree per hour drift. It's a simple.
Okay, let me tag you. Let me tag you in case you didn't see it yet. It's in the live stream right now. Live stream text about how the magnetic field can affect ring laser gyroscopes. I put the quote from paper with the link.
Okay, so exactly 15 degrees per hour, really? You're going to go with that?
I'm not. The effects can vary depending on the strength of the magnetic field, I'm assuming. But why would things like this? Why would things like this affect it?
How much? Why would they put 3 of them aboard every aircraft if it's affected by magnetism? Taylor?
It's also affected by the direction of travel as well.
How would I know that it's not measuring some constant effect that's in the atmosphere? And if not, then
because what you're doing is you have a commitment.
How are you isolating the factor of the 15 degree measurement?
You're doing it again. You're basically cherry picking. You're doing anything except the fact that the Earth is rotating.
Wait, hold on. How would you make it mutually exclusive if the effect that we're seeing on the gyroscope is from rotation? If things like the magnetic field can affect it, can affect the measurements and the readings?
Because you'd have to really stretch to say that it affects it exactly at 15 degrees per hour consistently.
Well, we don't know what's making it do 15 degrees per hour, but we can see that other factors are affected.
Why isn't it rotation of the Earth, Taylor?
I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying, how do we isolate the variables and figure out that it is?
Because we also have Foucault's pendulum. We also have satellites. We also have observation from beyond Earth.
Still doesn't make the ring laser gyroscope mean that it's measuring rotation.
Well, what happens when we have all of those pieces of evidence? And we have
Coriolis. I mean, we have to go through each one of them individually. You're just scattergunning. But yeah, I told you that the magnetic field can affect the ring laser gyroscopes, and I can back that up. And then now what?
But that's not going to affect a full-Cotes pendulum. It's not going to affect Coriolis.
Magnetism does affect full-Cotes pendulum, actually.
Space.
Yes, it does.
You can't just say,
there's magnetism does it. Yeah, well, do you want me to give you evidence?
It's interesting that you will accept any evidence except and consider all possible.
No, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying we have an effect. How can we isolate the cause? What you would do is you'd follow the scientific method and you'd isolate the variables except for one, which is the experimental group, to be able to isolate if this is actually what is causing it or not.
Okay, there's no one in the flat Earth community that's able to do that. So the best we can
you're the one making the claim.
The best we can have is to analyze the data that we do have.
You're the one making the claim that it's definitive proof of motion.
I didn't say it's definitive proof. It's part of the evidence. We also have Coriolis, we have it, et cetera, et cetera. We've been through it over 100 times.
Yeah, let's go through the Coriolis then. I mean, literally, how can we have an effect? What is the cause? Because there's different explanations for what the cause could be. So in order to isolate the cause, you would need to follow the scientific method. That's where it comes in. And I know you might not be a fan of it, but that's just what it is.
I'm not a fan of the Nathan Oakley version of the scientific method.
I don't follow Nathan Oakley.
You basically do.
No, I don't.
Well, okay.
Just because he might make the same argument that I do, which is, I'm someone who does experiments. That's why I'm particularly fond of the scientific method. Just because he might say the same thing doesn't mean I'm taking after Nathan Oakley and following. I'm just saying this is how you'd isolate a variable. You have an experimental group and a control group. That's the purpose of it. And then you can literally have one variable at a time that you're testing so you can isolate what is the cause to the effects. That's how you establish cause and effect. You can't just put any old cause to any effect. That's ridiculous.
Let's do that with Coriolis.
If you have a body of evidence that shows that any of this is true and your doubts are well-founded, I think it would have been established by now.
Show me one scientific method that is showing your model. That's all I'm asking. That shouldn't be very hard.
You're not. You're committed to flat Earth. I understand that. What you want to do is...
all you're doing is ad homing me right now. I'm just saying, show me where we can follow the scientific method and prove this.
Yeah, RedCloud, did you notice you're ad homing rather than...
How am I ad homing?
He's getting desperate because he knows we want to talk about Coriolis effect, and he's got no direct examples of Coriolis.
I have a direct example of a Coriolis effect.
Go ahead.
No, we need to isolate the cause of the
southern and northern hemispheres.
Why do these things happen is the question, and what we should be testing.
Deviation of ballistic missiles fired north or south. What have you got?
Deviation of missiles fired. So your claim is that ballistics... So your claim is that projectiles are spinning in one direction in the north and in a different direction in the south. Is that your claim?
You need to know what our model is, man.
Is that your claim or not?
What is the claim regarding ballistic missiles fired north or south? What's the claim?
Well, I'm asking you, is it the claim the deviation is going left in the north and right in the south?
You know this verbatim. You know our model, right?
I'm asking you to answer a simple question. Is that your claim or not?
The claim is that as a ballistic missile or projectile of any kind is fired north or south, it will deviate due to the rotation of the Earth under it.
Yeah, I just said that. All you had to do was confirm.
So you do know our.
Yeah, I literally just said, is that your claim? And you just didn't want to answer it.
Okay.
So you claim that. Yeah. So you claim that bullets and ballistics are spinning in different directions and deflecting due to the Coriolis due to the Earth's rotation, and it's different in the north and south. That's your claim, yeah?
Yeah, that's the observed phenomenon. Yes.
Okay. So where's the direct evidence for this? Because we have. Because there are evidence, like for example the world record sniper shot 4.5 miles didn't take this into account. Now when they did the world, and this is all on YouTube for you to see, when they did the world record shot, they had to go through absolutely everything they needed to take into account as a demonstration on the video. What they took into account was the drop, the wind, the weather. They did not speak or talk about Coriolis once.
What direction were they shooting?
I will go and double check that. But my point is, this is a wives' tale that isn't actually taken into account between the northern and southern hemisphere. You do not have any evidence.
A wives' tale, dude. This is something.
But you're making claims. You're the one with the burden of proof. Why do you believe that bullets are spinning deviating one direction in the north and one in the south? Is it because of your belief?
Even if that was the case, how would we isolate what is the cause of it? You can't just assume something.
Great point.
I assume it's the rotation of the Earth, unless you have data to say that it isn't that.
You don't have data. I don't need to refute something that has no evidence. Because unless you follow the scientific method and isolate the variables to figure out what is the cause of the effect, then I have nothing to refute.
I've never seen anyone on this side use the scientific method to prove flat Earth.
You're the one saying that there's evidence for motion. You're the one with the evidence. You have the burden to prove it.
It's your claim, and we've got mortarmen, we've got artillerymen within the flat Earth community who say that you need to take lots into account with long distance ballistics, including instrument sensitivity, sight aperture, the weather. Yeah, and human error is the biggest cause of these deviations. But never once has an artilleryman or a mortarman spoke to us and told us about the deviation due to the Coriolis effect. They're not trained in this. They're not taught to take this into account. And there's a hell of a lot of sensitivity that they do take into account, but Coriolis is not one of them. So
Actually,
you've made a claim. You've made a claim.
We have Navy PDFs that say they take the Coriolis effect into account.
Yeah, but in reality, this is not something that is taken into account, is it? It's just in the rhetoric.
Yeah, it's rhetoric for you to say that you have people in the community that say that they don't, but we have.
No, that's anecdotal.
Yes, that's anecdotal. That's meaningless.
Right.
We have
this is direct experience.
This is what you do in order to aim correctly. You must take Coriolis into effect. And the thing about the sniper shot that you said, the world record, you can't even tell me the direction it was fired.
I can. I just can't. I don't have that info in my head. Yeah, but I'm not on that at the moment, and I can go and find that quite easily. But the point is, if you're making these claims, right, that there is a Coriolis effect, then naturally, let's move this forward then. Naturally, that means that there is a deviation between the northern and southern hemisphere that will create a deflection. Once something is in the atmosphere and off the ground and traveling, then there will be a deflection. So we're talking about aeroplanes, we're talking about drones, we're talking about helicopters, we're talking about anything that leaves the ground and travels in a direction will be experiencing this deviation, right?
No, not quite. I get what you mean.
So only bullets. Only bullets then.
Well, everything, yes. If it's traveling north and south, yes. But the thing about a helicopter or a plane, it can change directions. It has the ability to change direction. So ballistic missile.
Yeah, because it's relative to the direction of travel. But what I'm saying is an aeroplane doesn't need to take any of this into account. If an aeroplane was to take this into account, it would miss its destination. Because an aeroplane does not take into account the deviation into its journey. It flies straight and level, and it will reach its destination by aiming at its destination. It doesn't have to aim before or after due to the hemisphere it's in. That is just a bunch of baloney, my friend.
I'm sorry, but you're talking about north and south. If you're flying from New York to London, done that flight many times, no, you don't have to do that.
And you don't have to do it between the hemispheres. Just like you don't need a runway to be facing in a certain direction either to minimize the Coriolis strain on the landing either. You don't need to do anything to take Coriolis into account. And when it comes to and you mentioned and I'll tell you what, weather patterns is your best argument, okay? Weather patterns was your best argument. That was the first thing you said. The problem with weather patterns, no, because everything else you don't really have any direct evidence. So for the room, weather patterns is his best argument. And the reason why weather patterns really isn't a good argument is because under the water you have eddies and spirals that are created very similarly to some of these hurricanes and tornadoes, and they are due to a dynamic system, due to hot and cold pressure and hot spots, warm spots and cold spots on the earth that are consistent, and they tend to mix and create these spirals in these directions due to the natural dynamic system that we live in. It happens under the water, and that's not due to Coriolis. Is it?
You can actually use a magnetic electric field and have the same effects, where you have clockwise and counterclockwise vortices radiating from the center. The magnetic field can cause the same effects.
So the water isn't moving anywhere near as fast as the atmosphere is. That's the first thing. It's relatively still.
What he's saying is that you can have these vortices form absent of the Coriolis effect and the wind.
Coriolis. Exactly.
And you're saying that the waters don't move as quick. Well, that's exactly kind of what he's saying as well. Is that it would be some deflection.
If you can find scientific evidence that the direction of storms in the north and the southern hemisphere are not caused by Coriolis and are caused by an alternative, or there's an alternative explanation, I'd like to see it.
Not caused by Coriolis and caused by alternative?
Yeah.
But what do you consider Coriolis? Do you consider the fact that, the clockwise and counterclockwise, do you consider that Coriolis effect, or are you giving a cause to the Coriolis effect?
Well, the Coriolis effect is pretty self-evident. If you have storms in one hemisphere going a certain way, and only a certain way, and then storms in the other hemisphere going only the opposite way, it's pretty, when you have other evidence to say that it's Earth rotation, then you should go with Earth rotation rather than magical, magnetism of some kind doing it. It doesn't really.
But there's also papers about how the gyroscope precession, which is Coriolis driven, and the Larimar precession, which is magnetic, share similar mathematic forms and equations.
Okay, so do you have a body of evidence that can suggest that all these effects are magnetism, or just do you have ad hoc?
No, I have papers that go through the different mathematic formulas.
I know, but it is a bit ad hoc.
Also, she doesn't need to provide that. It's your claim.
Yeah.
She's just countering your claim by saying you do not know this. You're making a claim that you can't back up, and we're highlighting to you that there could be other reasons for this. And when you say this is relative, so it wouldn't affect planes, drones, then you can't use Foucault's pendulum, my friend. Because if it's all relative, then Foucault's pendulum is not. It doesn't count in this example. It doesn't happen above Earth. And Foucault's pendulum is no longer evidence for your Coriolis effect, then is it?
Because if you attach a weight to a long string to a ceiling, as it precesses, as it swings backwards and forwards, if the Earth is motionless, then it shouldn't move at a very specific and divert at a very specific rate, which it does according to your latitude.
No, there's actually papers in the magnetic like that too, because they actually have like a motor in the Foucault's pendulum.
Yeah, that's ad hoc excuses.
And we've also got lots of examples.
It's for motion of the Earth. But no, they have papers for that. It's not ad hoc excuses. You can actually test it in different magnetic fields. You'll actually affect the pendulum.
No one's actually in the flat Earth community.
And also the pendulum. Listen, and also the pendulum spins in the wrong direction very often. If this is caused by a steady turning of the Earth's surface, then that would not be possible to be naturally deviating in the wrong direction. That would be impossible, even to happen once.
Yeah,
eddy currents will actually affect the Foucault's pendulum. You can look into that.
Yeah, here's the thing: you can have anomalies on any test that seemingly would be conclusive. You'll have anomalies.
Anomalies, but the thing is, if it's an anomaly, why is anything affecting it? If it's just from something, if it's consistently measuring something that's consistent, like the rotation, and that's the only force that it's measuring, then why would it have anomalies ever?
That's a good question.
Tayler, have you never been on a conveyor belt?
It's not mutually exclusive to the motion of the Earth. If that's something that's consistent.
But Tayler, have you never been on a conveyor belt and travelled in the wrong direction as an anomaly?
I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying, how can we isolate the cause? My only question is, how do we isolate the cause of the effect? I acknowledge there's an effect, so what's the cause?
Because that's up to you to produce a body of evidence to prove that is what is happening.
I'm not claiming the Foucault's pendulum proves any model.
No, you are.
So I don't need to make a body of evidence. I'm just saying, how can we isolate the variables at play?
You're assuming the variables haven't been isolated then?
Yeah, they haven't. Show me where they have.
And so ring laser gyros can't be used, and you can't use Foucault's pendulum, and you can't use Coriolis with the north and south.
No, you can use whatever you want. But how can you isolate the cause? There's some sort of precession happening, fine. But how do we know that what that's from? If things like the magnetic field can affect them, then how can we isolate it from motion of the Earth?
Because it honestly sounds like ad hoc excuses to explain each one away instead of looking at going with the body.
I'm literally just asking a question that any rational scientist should, which is, how can we isolate a cause per the effect?
But each one you'd have to talk to the scientists to do that, and you'd have to do the experiments yourself, and then you'd have to each one you personally would have to gather the information, because of course you can't trust anybody, so you personally would have to do it, and then you'd have to show it to people.
I'm not arguing with the results. I'm just arguing with the conclusion of the results.
Right, but
what do you conclude from the results, and how do we isolate that?
That's up to you to provide the evidence. It's not.
Dude, I'm not using the pendulum as evidence. I'm not claiming that it proves one way or another.
Yeah, all of this is basically, in order to remain in the flat Earth belief, you sort of have to keep questioning everything instead of actually getting empirical evidence to support your claims.
Empirical? Where are we using scientific
evidence to support your
claims?
You're saying where are your measurements of flat Earth?
Okay,
Empiricism.
you just keep like shifting the burden of proof. Like, I'm not making claims.
And the proof is on you to prove flat Earth, because flat Earth is.
I'm questioning your proofs, and then you're saying I need to prove something. And I'm asking you, how do I prove it? And your only response is, I need to get some $10,000, satellite or something like that. And I'm saying, okay, well then help me get it. Okay, so then you can't help me get it. So then what?
Why are you asking me how you prove your belief?
How do you know that I'm not trying to prove it?
How long have you been a flat earther?
I'm never identified as that. You keep labeling me as that.
Oh, good grief! You won't be pinned down even on you being a flat earther.
Dude, I'm just asking for your proof. Okay.
I'm asking for your proof. The body of evidence.
If you're saying there's empirical evidence,
that is not. It's up to you to provide that evidence, not to gainsay every piece of evidence that we have. It's up to you.
You should be doing that as a scientist. You should be looking for people to isolate variables and identify the cause to effects. You can't just say, "Oh, this is what we want it to be, therefore that's what it is." You can't just do that. You can't do that in science.
No, we can look at the evidence and draw a conclusion based on the body of evidence. And every single time that people do that, they come with the inevitable conclusion that is not even questioned, because it can't be questioned, is that the Earth is a globe. And if you have evidence that it isn't a globe, that's up to you. But unfortunately,
full of shit. There's no evidence. There's no evidence. There's no Coriolis. There's no deviation. There's just a mythologized. No, there's a mythologized idea that there is a deviation, right? And the best argument you've got is the weather patterns. Everything else is not affected by the Coriolis. This is a myth. You'll need 2 reference frames for that. And in order to claim, yes, you do. For Coriolis, you need 2 reference frames, a rotating and a non-rotating. And in order for that to be the case, that must be fixed. So that means other things in reality should be affected by these 2 reference frames. The problem is we don't have 2 reference frames. We do not have deviation in the atmosphere at any height. So you do not have a claim. You cannot claim Coriolis is fact and obvious like you do and everybody. No, this is a belief, my friend, just like all the other evidences that you provided. It's belief based on your religious zealotry of the globe. But when it comes to empiricism, which is all Tayler is asking for, she's not making a claim. She's highlighting that there could be other explanations for these things, but she's doing it in the vein that you are making a direct claim that you cannot back up. And she's just helping you to realize you do not have any direct evidence for any of this.
I have direct evidence. You're just simply denying it. When we have photographs, you say they're fake. When we go to Antarctica and
we're talking about Coriolis.
Antarctica doesn't exist.
You can't use that as evidence. You cannot get that peer reviewed and says this provides conclusive evidence to one or another, because they even admit that things like these pictures are not raw images. Many of these images are not raw images that I've been able to research. So you can't use this as evidence.
Yes,
I don't know what your standard of evidence is, but it must be extremely low.
Your criteria. You
have 0 controls or bigger to your experiments, dude. This is no experiment.
Yeah. All of your
this is just an observational analysis. At best, this is an observational study that you're using. You're not actually following the scientific method whatsoever. You have 0 controls or explainability to your results.
What the scientific method is
self-destruction, my friend.
The scientific method is making observations and drawing conclusions.
Where are your controls? Where's your experimental group? Where is your statistics?
If I have an experiment I want to perform, I don't necessarily have any controls.
What?
I don't have to necessarily have any controls.
For what? For using the scientific method?
So, for example,
so how are you going to isolate a variable then?
Well, let's say deciding if something is near to me or far away from me. I don't have to have controls. I can just do a measurement or an observation.
That's an observational study. That's not following the scientific method then.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter, because if I have something,
for proving the cause to effects, you need to use the scientific method to isolate. You need to understand the purpose of it. It's to isolate different variables. So basically, you make an experimental control where you have just a standard baseline. You change one thing, and then you look at the effect with all the other variables controlled for. If I say that this lake, that all the fish died out, I would need to figure out why they died out. So then I would basically do different test analysis on the lake, look at the pH, look at the oxygen content levels. Then I would go measure if each one of those variables is enough to actually kill those fish. I would make the oxygen content levels match what I saw on the lake. I would make the pH match what I saw on the lake and see if it would be enough to cause the fish die off in a controlled setting, and then isolate which one of these variables actually caused the fish to die off. You can't just say, oh, well, I think it was because of, pollution, as much as I agree with that. Like, dumping stuff in the lake or whatever, I wouldn't be able to conclusively say, yes, it's because of that, unless I control all the other variables and see which one will cause the effect.
What variables do I need to account for to say the distance to the moon, figure out how far the moon is? If I want to, I have 2 choices. I can go with the flat Earth idea that the moon is close, or I can go with the globe idea the moon is far away. What would I need to do to confirm the moon is close or far away?
Well, you might need to do to scale models and do different observational analysis with that.
Okay.
And do different angular sizes as it moves over the Earth. How fast would it move over the Earth? What would be the angular size?
Yep.
In each model, and then try to figure out how far away it would be, by scaling things down and replicating them.
Okay, so all of those things have been done for the size of the moon for the past millennia.
So where is the to-scale model of the moon in the eclipse that I can view?
We have the inevitable and irrefutable conclusion that that the moon is not local. The moon is not close to us.
Can you please provide me any to-scale model of the moon? I've been looking. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying I've been looking for it and I can't find it.
You have not been looking for it.
You're lying. I was looking for it earlier.
That was my line. No,
that's not true. I was looking for it earlier. I saw methods where I can basically replicate them.
Called out on your BS, dude. It really isn't.
Okay, then post the link. Post the link.
No, what you need to do is you need to prove that.
So you already lied about me multiple times now. You just lied about me again.
I know it's annoying, but this is something
Guy's a joker.
Just goes on and on and on. You don't have the distance to the moon. You will never know the distance to the moon.
Obfuscation, sophistry, fallacious reasoning. Anything else you want to add to this shit show?
Evidence.
It's not needed, man. Come on, seriously. Either bring something positive to the argument or don't use that. Taylor, I have a question for you. You said I've looked into a number of things. You said moon, scaled moon. What is it exactly again?
It's a scale model
Of the moon. You're
Yes.
looking for. Okay. Number two, you said you haven't found any raw images. Of what raw images are you referring to? Raw images of what?
Processed images of the Earth. Whenever you actually look into, like, for example, if NASA publishes a picture, you go on their website, you look at the methods that they use and go read the papers that they published about how they process these images. Like, for example, somebody gave me a picture of of evidence that Apollo was on the moon. They were trying to show me some tracks from the moon, and then I go and look at the methods that they used to actually process this image and to publish this image, and then found out that they were using Unreal Engine, which is something that you can use to make video games and AI footage. AI videos. So whenever you look into these pictures, I'm not saying that they're raw images. Now, I have seen raw images from Cassini and looked through hundreds of those, but didn't see any of the Earth in general, of the Earth in particular. I did see pictures of translucent moons, though, which didn't make any sense to me, but that's another topic.
Okay, so in terms of images, I can provide you a library of Apollo 11, 217, the mission to the moon. All the raw images. There's no, I think RedCloud, I know you're in media, and I know you love your photos, whatever, so you can back me up on this one quite easily. I know that's your specialty. So if I give you the raw images, they are massive, the TIFF, the TIFF, the raw images, would that be convincing enough?
Yeah, and just post me the paper on the materials I did in North.
I know you're clever enough, so that's the thing. Just, I've said this before, I say it again. So when you go to NASA website for a picture, and then say the picture NASA put into their website is fake, that's not right. No, I didn't say you. I'm just saying. I've just literally said it's not what you said. I'm saying in general. When people say that, NASA is not going to upload a raw image into their website for presentation, if that makes sense. Okay, that picture is usually gigs and hundreds of megs. Okay, it will render that page useless. Does that make sense? So for the website page, what they do, they put a compressed version of that file. Okay, they use different methods to compress it. And what happens is when you look at that image looks a bit funny. You got artifacts in the image usually and whatnot. Okay, so do not use that. Do not use that image as your source of evidence. And say, okay, I've downloaded a picture from NASA website and it's looking fake. Therefore, that image is fake. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but if they were to just take one single shot, I don't know why the file would be so big to where they can't upload it.
Like I'll put one as an example, okay? And I don't need to I'll just put one in. I'll put the actual link and I'll do the rest.
To nitpick, there aren't any raw images of Apollo missions. They're all taken on film, so they're all scanned by definition. That kind of so they're interpreted digitally. But yeah, they're on raw film, so they can't be photoshopped. And Photoshop didn't exist back then. The other thing is, almost all photographs are processed. Whether or not they are processed, it doesn't make the image that they produce in any way doubtful. If I take a photograph of a model and it's a raw image, I don't show her the raw image.
It's not real. Ladies and gentlemen, the images that purportedly have to have come from Apollo would have been subjected to so much radiation that the film would have been destroyed. And if you go to What Happened on the Moon, parts 1 and parts 2 and 3, What Happened on the Moon, parts 1, parts 2 and 3, they discuss the anomalies in the photographs because they came out too perfect. They should have been destroyed by the radiation, you see, and not to mention the cosmic ray particles. All right, we have already subjected films to just 5 rems of radiation, and the whole picture is completely obliterated. So therein is an anomaly straight away. But remember, man never landed on the moon anyway. So this is just fantasy talk is what you're listening to at the moment. Fantasy talk as if they've gone to the moon when they haven't.
Aren't there upcoming high altitude balloon trips that people can take? Coming up, isn't it? There's going to be offering really high altitude balloon blimp trips. I hear.